Welcome to another episode of Fairytale Flip. I am Vanessa Y Rogers, and my co-host is Donna Lee Fields from Scaffolding Magic. I have a podcast called Fabric of Folklore, and every month we come together and we discuss one fairy tale and kind of dissect it. We look at its hidden meanings, its symbolism, its history, and what it means for us in modern days. This month, we are choosing a story called La Befana. Sometimes it's called Old Bafana. And Donna is going to give a summary of this story.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Donna. Yes, and it's such a pleasure to be here with Vanessa as usual. Let's see if we can find some really interesting tidbits about this legend. I'm going to tell you the story of Old Bafana, which is particular to Italy. Hopefully, I never heard of it before. Vanessa chose this one, and I love her choices. So I've been really interested in finding out the history of it. And Old Bafana is really about Befana and the wise men, and it's a Christmas tale, which is usually only told in Italy, but let's go into it. So one night, the three wise men were following the star to Bethlehem, as we know they did, and they stopped at Old Bafana's house to ask for directions. And Old Befana is known in the neighborhood as a woman who was very antisocial. She baked and she swept, and she swept and she baked all day long. And she didn't talk to anyone else. But these three wise men came to her house, asked her for directions for Bethlehem, and she pretty much ignored them. She was very rude to them. The Magi invited them, even though she was rude and even though she didn't know where the child Jesus was born, they invited her to join them on their journey. And she said no, she had too much work to do. And then later, after they left, she realized that she might have made a mistake. And so what she did is she started baking obsessively. And then after she baked, she realized her house was still dirty. So she started sweeping even more obsessively. And then she packed up all what she baked and she ran to try to catch up with the three wise men, but she never could. And what happened is she kept running and running. And finally, she started running up in the sky. And now she's known as Old Befana, who wanders the skies in the Epiphany Eve, and she is looking for the Christ child. And what she does now is what the folktale or the legend says, is that she visits every home, leaving gifts for the good children and for the children who haven't been so wonderful, coal. And she has a lot of symbolism with it all, and that's what we're going to go into. Mm-hmm. So Vanessa, I'm going to ask you what you always ask me. Why did you choose this tale? And how long have you known about it also?
I just learned about it this year. So I came across it when I was looking up different mythical creatures for Christmas. And I was kind of intrigued by her. And you and I usually do an episode every month, but we didn't do one for December. And so I had suggested La Befana because we could do it in the very beginning of January, and it would still be very close to the time that La Befana generally gives gifts, which is January 6th, which is Epiphany Day. And so I thought it would, kind of cover Christmas and also cover a partially separate holiday, but it's within the 12 days of Christmas celebration. So I was really intrigued by that element. My first reaction to La Befana was when I was reading the story and the three wise men come and they have the three gifts that they're going to give to the baby Jesus, and she decides, no, I want to give the mother presents of treats, and I also want to clean up for her. And to me, speaking as a mother, that spoke to me because three men giving these like really obscure gifts, although gold I guess is not that obscure, but in the moment, gold does not do you very much good. I loved gifts of service when people would come and help out with things around my house, and also when they would feed me, because when you have a newborn child, they take up every ounce of energy and space in your life. And so I felt like she was speaking my language, whereas the three wise men gifts, just especially now, so far removed from the time period, I know that they had a lot more significance during that time period when they were being given, but baked goods and someone cleaning for me, that sounded like a perfect gift to me when I had a newborn child.
Yeah, I love, and you have three, so you've had three newborn children.
Yeah.
So I really do like that. There, it is a really nice note in the story that she was focused on the mother, not the child necessarily, and that's really nice because people do focus on the babies because they're so sweet and so have so much possibilities. But especially in the story, and I didn't grow up Catholic. I'm not Christian, and I think I take these stories more globally, more more holistically. But the mother of this pure baby was pure herself. And Befana, even though she didn't know the mother, really recognized her as such, as a pure person who needed to be recognized as such. And she brought her broom to sweep wherever the baby was going to be born. It really was a very sweet touch.
Now, you currently live in Mexico and you have lived in Spain. Have you come across any Epiphany celebrations in the countries that you have lived in?
Well, that's really interesting. I think Mexico is more religious. Spain is a Catholic country, but they're not really religious. The culture is more Catholic, but it's a very small part of the population that really goes to church and is devout. In Mexico, they're much more. It's going to sound really judgmental when I say this, but they're more honest about their religion. They really do live their religion, and I really do appreciate that. And so epiphanies, since I'm not really focused on it, Vanessa, I can't say, yes, there are a lot of celebrations, but in Mexico there are more. Yeah.
Well, I remember as a child hearing about people getting 3 wise men gifts in January, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't see it or hear many people talk about it, but I did know that it happened, but I just didn't really know much about it.
Okay, so yeah, in Spain, Christmas is less important than the Three Kings Day, which is January 6th. So it's the same thing. Yeah. But again, it's more commercial than anything. It's not religious for the popular culture. So when you say Epiphany, I don't think of the King's Day as an epiphany because that's very religious and it's sacred. So that's my answer here. Commercial or religious?
I think it's always a little intertwining. Did you have a reaction to it, or any other reaction to the story when you first read it? Because I remember sending it to you and you saying, "Oh, I really like this story. I see a lot of symbolism."
I know, and I wish I'd saved that link where I found all the symbolism, and I found another one, but I didn't realize when I first saw it that Befana was a religious figure, or that was really tied to a religious day. I didn't realize that then, and so I was very excited because I love symbolism. But I started reading, and I'm not crazy about stories that are tied to one day or one religion and that sort of thing. So I wasn't really enthusiastic about it at first, but as always, when I start researching it and find symbolism and finding different ties to other cultures and other tales, then I get excited. And so, yeah, now I see a lot of different ways. And also, since you also know that I think it's very important to look at these stories and see how they influence us as children and how they influence children. You have 3 that listen to you all the time. It's very important to be aware that they might be giving us subliminal messages that may or may not be what we want. And so we're going to go there as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but the first thing, I really need to establish this. Now, when I look it up, it says the Legend of Old Bafana. But I found something that says it actually is a folktale. It has supernatural powers. It comes from one specific culture. It doesn't have a specific author, and it teaches a lesson. What would you think?
So the title, The Legend of Old Bafana, is by Tommy dePaola, who is a very famous Italian-American children's illustrator and author. He took a lot of different folktales and made them into books. So one of my absolutely favorite folktales of his is The Legend of the Bluebonnet, which is very specific to Texas because that is our state flower. Another of his books is the legend, I think it's just called Strega Nona, and that is, Strega is witch and Nona is grandmother in Italian. and that is another folktale. So he is famous for taking folktales and popularizing them. And so I, I'm not a folklorist, so I'm gonna take a stab here. It is a legend in that it is rooted in a time and a place, but I think it's primarily told as a folktale because I don't believe people feel that there's truth to it. So that's my take.
Okay, I like that. People know that there's no truth to it. So let's talk about, if you don't mind, how about if we start with her physical appearance, because that also is very important to me, and about the subliminal messages. And first of all, we always, in English, you always say old Befana. It's not Befana. She's portrayed as an old woman with just a couple of teeth. She has raggedy clothes. She doesn't even have the high boots that a witch in most fairy tales would have. She has low shoes and comfortable socks. So she looks at it like an innocuous person who won't hurt anyone. My question is, why does but later on, she's portrayed as this woman that is very generous. She gives gifts. She saw the light. At first, she rejected what the three wise men wanted her to do, which is go with them and celebrate the birth of this, very special baby. So why is it that she had to be portrayed as an old woman who was obsessive, who had old clothes? That bothers me.
Oh, that's interesting. The old element bothers you? I think primarily because she's grumpy. And we think of a lot of grumpy people as older. Even if they're not necessarily old, the grumpiness makes someone feel older. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I feel like crankiness ages a person.
That's so funny. I love that. It's very possible. And that could be at any age, actually, because there are a lot of grumpy 20, 30-year-olds, aren't there?
Right. Yes.
Right.
And,
Well,
if you look in like television, if you look at older shows, like when I was a child and I was watching people who were my age, who are in the middle age, I feel like they were portrayed looking much older than our generation currently dresses and looks. Like the way they portrayed themselves seemed like they looked older. Whereas I feel like my generation, which is I'm an elderly millennial, that's what I'm called, the geriatric millennials. um, we still kind of dress with a youthful flair. I don't really know, but I've seen people comment on this trend, where in the past middle-aged people dressed frumpier, and now it's not quite the case.
Well, I think that's really important because when I was younger, I think I'm about 20 years older than you, and we used to think that all of a sudden you become an adult. And when you become an adult, you have to dress differently and you act differently. So we're talking about something similar. But if you notice, even in the ads, they're now portraying older women as beautiful, as wearing beautiful flowing clothes. And so there is a movement to show older women as different than frumpy.
Yeah.
And so we have Befana, who's the same thing. She has an apron on. And this, to me, this comes from the fact we know now that the Catholic Church took so many pagan holidays and made them Christian just to sort of appease the general public.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't have a beautiful woman because that would be for them too threatening. So they had to make this woman who was so beloved in this legend to make sure that she was ugly and frumpy and grumpy.
I found several different descriptions of her. It says most modern representation, she's an elderly woman with a dark shawl, wearing a kerchief on her head, and riding a broom. Most of the time, she's riding it backwards. Sometimes she's described as being ugly and toothless, while there have been iconographies that show her with feline teeth that are sharp. And she has a cutting tongue and a sooty face from all the chimneys that she's going down. Grimm, I'm not sure which brother Grimm, described her as a misshapen fairy, which I thought was interesting. And there's a lot of different controversial elements about her. And I thought that I found this quote from a folklorist. He summed it like this: "She is grandmotherly but witch-like, the target of endless mockery but deeply beloved, ridiculous and dignified, domestic yet a wanderer, weak and dependent yet feared and powerful. She is an old woman played by a young man." So I guess in all of these processions and all of these locations in Italy where they have La Befana days where they're celebrating La Befana, she's played by a young man dressed up as an old
Interesting.
hag.
Interesting. Well, see, now let's go to what I think that she symbolizes, because what I really like is that there's a lot of depth to her. She sweeps obsessively. She's very antisocial. And what is a sweeping? And what happens? She's sweeping obsessively. She wears an apron also, by the way. So what you were saying, there's this big contradiction in between someone who takes care of the home, but also someone who wanders, which is the opposite of what most women are portrayed to do. Mostly men are the wanderers and women stay at home. So there's a really nice contradiction there that I like. But also this sweeping symbolizes any of us who have an obsession about something. So if we're so obsessed with what we're doing that we're ignoring an incredible opportunity, we need to look at that. And that's one thing I really like about her. So she's sweeping obsessively. She rejects the whole opportunity of going to this blessed event. And then she changes her mind and realizes what she's done, and she goes after it. And it's described almost as if this weight on her is being lifted, this weight of having to obsessively clean. We could say anything, obsessively do art, obsessively read, obsessively eat. Whatever it is we're obsessive about, all of a sudden it leaves her and she literally flies up into the sky. And so the weight is now off of her. She realizes that she doesn't have to be obsessed about something that is fairly meaningless and menial, and that she's flying through the sky and she becomes a sort of goddess, which I like. So this is the lesson we learn from the story.
I found it interesting that she was so grumpy and she was not friendly, and yet she keeps this incredibly tidy house. Who is she keeping it tidy for? Like, I know everyone has their own ways of keeping house, and generally I clean my house when people are going to come over. Like, that's, I'm cleaning for other people, but she's cleaning for herself. Or maybe it's like you said, it's just an obsession. It's something that she has to hold on to. The element of sweeping is interesting, though, because I found that there are these parallels with the Roman goddess that she is connected with, and she sweeps away the old year's troubles and hardships, making way for renewal and prosperity in the new year. And so that was one of the symbolisms I found of what the sweeping represented, that she's sweeping and clearing out all last year's echoes and last year's troubles and customs and making way for the new year of prosperity.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's absolutely one of the ways we can look at it. And the other way is that she's sweeping for no one. As you say, there's no one's visiting her. She's sweeping obsessively. She's baking obsessively and doesn't invite anyone over. And we, in fact, never see her eating. So I would say it's more that this obsessive need to do something instead of taking this opportunity of, a blessed, something that might mean more to her, is what I would say. But the interesting thing also is that you were saying she wears a kerchief, and a kerchief is often seen and symbolizes a trip. It's a chance you're going to go see places. So again, we have this dichotomy of this woman who's obsessed about her home and doesn't want to leave it, but she's dressed with the symbolism of someone who's going to be traveling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's also the symbolism of the broom, which I also like, because you're saying sweeping away the old year. A broom also can symbolize sweeping out bad energy, negative energy. And so she keeps sweeping out negative energy, and look what she brings in. She brings in the three wise men.
Yeah.
That's pretty beautiful. So another way we can look at what's happening is, yes, she's obsessive about cleaning something that's meaningless, but also if she's cleaning away bad energy, she did it. she got to another side. She broke karma, which is beautiful too.
Yeah, really a redemptive story.
Yeah, I think so. All right, what else have you been interested in about the story?
Well, I wanted to know how far back the story went. And the story is linked to Roman traditions, like we were talking about before. A lot of these traditions were kind of incorporated from pagan rituals and taken by the church and remade in church language.
Vocabulary.
So because people didn't want to give up their old traditions, and so the church, instead of making the people give up their old traditions, just kind of rebranded. And so the roots are connected to Strenia, which was a Roman goddess who's associated with the new year, purification, and fertility. And there was a festival where people exchanged gifts. And during the festival, people would also they would give branches of Vervarian, which was from a sacred grove, as a good omen on the first day. And then they would also burn branches and leaves and things. I'm not really sure what that symbolized for them. It was originally introduced by King Tatius. He was a Roman king, and so this makes it as old as at least 2,700 years old. And you were mentioning the witch element, which is believed to have come in during the Middle Ages, because that's when a lot of the medieval superstitions about witches and spirits really started to take shape, I guess, in the minds of Christianity. And so I think that's really when that witch look got tacked on to Old Bafana. And then she really got firmed up in the Renaissance period as part of the Italian folklore, especially in central and southern Italy, with written records from that period that mentioned and tied her character specifically to Epiphany. And should we define Epiphany? Because, I wasn't actually, if you're not in the Catholic tradition, I was not familiar with what Epiphany was. Had you heard of that term?
Well, I use the term a lot. Oh, I just had an epiphany. An epiphany is, sort of something incredible. I made connections, really strong connections, not just something light. Is that what you've come up with?
No, it actually has I'm trying to find. I found the actual definition of what Epiphany it was, but Epiphany and the 12th night of Christmas, are the same day, and I don't know if they're celebrated the same I think they're celebrated differently. I did look up. I'll find. I'll find what it meant. But let me go into a little bit of some of the different ways people celebrate Epiphany.
Okay, but just before you go into it, I did
Okay.
want to comment on the wood burning, because that really is very cross-cultural, because we have wood burning in Spain. They have fallas, where they burn. It started by burning all the wood the carpenters didn't use for the rest of the year, and so now they make these huge structures, supposedly out of wood, not anymore, and burn it. And in the United States, we have Burning Man, and that is in New Mexico. It's a big celebration in California. So we have other traditions of wood burning. So I like that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I actually I interviewed my guest, and I have not aired the show yet. It will come in. It will probably be in February when we air it. But we talk about Burning Man and how at the end of Burning Man, all of the structures are burned to the ground, and part of that is just releasing things and the act of letting go and allowing yourself not to hold on to everything. And I didn't realize that was really a core principle of Burning Man. Now, I've never been, so but I have heard that it is it can be pretty magical and life transforming.
Well, they also do a lot of drugs there, so that's also part of the
But do you know that there's a kids section, like a section for families? So now they're trying to make it more family friendly. I guess there's probably only certain sections where it's probably safe to bring your children.
Okay, probably. No, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty manic. And I never
Have
went
you been?
I went to the one in Santa Fe once. And I'm
Okay.
not great with crowds, but it's, huge, but it's more Native American. The Burning Man in California is pretty, we'd say gringo down here, but, it's pretty established in the popular culture.
Mm.
What I was, oh shoot, now I forgot the soot thing. So yeah, again, Befana was covered in soot, and it's all about she's sweeping and sweeping and trying to get all that negative energy off of her. And the story is about redemption, as you said, where she does get the negative energy off her. She does get the soot. She is burning off negative energy, and she literally is lifted and weightless and flying in the sky. So these things work.
Well, okay, so you mentioned that there are 3 different variations that I found, like main variations of La Befana. There's the one that Tommy dePaola wrote about, where she's just a cranky old woman who doesn't make friends easily. The second version that I liked is she is a grieving mother who lost her child to Herod, who killed all of the firstborns when he learned that there was going to be a Christ child. And so in order to make sure no child took over as king, he had all of the firstborns murdered, and she's actually a grieving mother, and that's why she's cranky. And the third version I heard was that she is basically a healer. And healers, as we know, have this kind of controversy around them, because people try and keep them at arm's length until they need them, and then they seek them out, right? They have all of this knowledge, and
It's intimidating for people.
Yes, they're intimidating, but they're also outsiders, right? They're always considered outsiders. And so one version is that she's a healer, and so she's kept at arm's length, but she, has this ability to already help others. And those women were always portrayed as witches a lot of times, right? A lot of times they were called white witches, which in turn meant that they were good witches, but still with the terminology of a witch, right?
Okay, so you brought up the like corresponding to Greek mythology twice, and I just wanted to add that what I found is that she has been cross-culturally connected to Hecate from the I don't know if you'd pronounce it differently, Hecate, wouldn't you say?
Yes, that's how I pronounce it, but I pronounce everything wrong.
Yeah, I know. The Greek goddess. I actually looked up how to pronounce Befana. We're saying it the same way that we would in Italy, so that's good.
Okay.
What I was going to say is what I find fascinating, again, this is back to the physical appearance, and the Greek goddesses are like lauded for being gorgeous and beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. And I think it's very interesting that it's really the only place where women are what we would say aesthetically pleasing for whatever culture you're talking about. Maybe not the African culture, because they're usually depicted as very slim and blonde, and they have Caucasian features normally. And I'm going to go really woo-woo here, but edit this out if you want. But what they say about the Greek gods is that they were really depicted as alien cultures that sort of founded humanity and sort of seeded humanity. And so they were allowed to keep their physical features because they came from figures, characters, people, living beings that actually were on the planet, which I find fascinating.
Okay, wait. Okay, let's clarify. So you're saying that the Greek gods and goddesses were actually aliens?
What we would call aliens. It's such a horrible word, but yeah, they were people from other planets. Yeah.
Okay, and so they looked so stunning because they weren't actually human?
I would say that what they say is the Greek gods are really seeded the part of humanity that are now Scandinavians. And so Scandinavians look very much like what you would depict a Greek goddess and god to be. If you can follow that.
And so, but where in this woo-woo theory, where are they now?
Well, they've left the planet, but they've seeded humanity. And so some of us look more like them than others. But I guess the point that I'm bringing it up is that in the Greek mythology, they're permitted to retain their beauty, whereas in most other legends, women are depicted as being fairly unattractive and, homely, that sort of thing. And
Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying.
Okay. So anyway, thank you for letting me share that part.
I'm just trying to think through that. It's interesting. I'm trying to think of other cultures with different goddesses and gods, and how, really I only know, of the Celtic gods and goddesses, but I don't know how they're depicted. That's something I feel like we should dive into more on another day, because that seems like an interesting trail to follow.
Yeah, just sort of how women are depicted in tales.
Yeah.
In fairy tales, they are beautiful and yet weak and needy. And in Greek mythology, it's not like that at all. And I guess in the German tradition and the fairy tales, and most of the fairy tales that we talk about, the princesses are not able to take care of themselves in most cases.
Right. They're either the princess who's the maiden who has no life experience and needs someone to come save her, or the powerful witch, right? An powerful, ugly witch.
Right, as in this case. And yet in Greek mythology, they are powerful and they are scary sometimes, and they do know how to take care of themselves.
That's right, yeah.
Right. But what I was going to say, just to finish this up, she is sometimes thought to be a cross-cultural connection to this Hecate, but she's believed, and Hecate was believed to be living in both worlds, which I was fascinated with. She holds the keys that you can go through to change your boundaries, to change your world. And Befana was on the earth, and then she lived in the sky. So she also is a division between the physical earth and another boundary, the heavens. Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely like that. Okay, I was going to talk about different ways people celebrate Epiphany around the world. You ready for this?
Yes.
Okay, so Epiphany it means the appearance of God. So it's basically the celebration of when the three wise men come and meet baby Jesus. Now, biblical scholars can't actually they don't even actually know if that element of the story has any truth to it. A lot of times the historians try and find where the truth of the biblical stories lie, and I think there's only one story, and that's in Matthew, of this telling. There are people who name the three wise men, and I think that comes from texts outside of the Bible, but within the Bible itself, there are no names for these three men who come to visit the baby. And they say that it wouldn't take them 12 days. It would have taken them 1 to 2 years to actually find Jesus. But
But 12 is a very important number. 12 is very important, yeah.
Oh, so what does 12 signify?
Well, can we go back to woo-woo?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay. So 12, there are 12 suns. In each of the universes of the sun, there are 12 planets. 12 is a very important number. The 12 apostles, you see 12 over and over again. If you really want an answer, I'm going to have to research a little bit more, but it's one of those numbers where it's inserted in many fairy tales because it's so important.
Interesting. Yeah. That is something we'll have to look into, the number 12. Okay, so Epiphany celebrates when the three wise men come and give the gifts to the baby Jesus. So this is celebrated all over the world in different ways. So the 5 main ways that is celebrated is with gift giving, As in La Befana, she gives gifts to the children as she's visiting them around Italy. Water-related rituals, processions and parades, house blessings, and special food. So gift giving happens in countries like Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, Philippines. Children often leave out shoes for sweets and money, and they're waiting for the three wise men to give them gifts, not La Befana, because La Befana is very specific to Italy, whereas most other countries, the three wise men visit children and leave gifts. In Spain, they have parades where the three kings distribute gifts in the parade. In Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, children go door to door in groups of 3 and receive coins or treats. Okay, so the water-related ones, this marks the baptism of Jesus. So this doesn't always actually happen on January 6th, which is Epiphany. Sometimes it happens a couple of weeks later. In Bulgaria, young men race to retrieve a wooden cross that's thrown into the water by a priest. In Ethiopia and Eritrea, a celebration called Timkat features blessing of water and processions. In Ukraine, people swim in an icy lake and river, believing that the water is blessed. In Romania, they have also a boys' race to swim and grab a cross. There's lots of different parades all over the world. There's 90 cities in Poland that holds a three wise men procession. Puerto Rico, children also lay out food like grass and water for the camels, which I thought was really cute. There's house blessings where people mark doors with chalk for blessings. And also there's more in Austria and Germany, children go singing door to door, singing carols for donations. And then this is interesting because I did not realize that Mardi Gras in New Orleans is connected to Epiphany.
Really?
Because Epiphany marks the start of carnival season. And so one of the most special foods that is created for Epiphany is the king cake, which basically is like a bundt cake, and there's a baby Jesus, at least in the Mardi Gras ones that we have. There's a baby Jesus baked in, and so the person who gets the baby Jesus, I think, is lucky. In other places, there's a bean, and the person who finds the bean becomes the king or queen for the day, which that sounds really fun. So this is a really common treat with Epiphany. Any thoughts with that? Do you have a king cake in Spain or in Mexico? Have you seen that?
Yeah, that's really popular. That's really popular. And what I love to tell people is the kings are very adaptable, because I used to live on the beach and the kings came in by boat. They didn't come in by camels. They came in by boat. And so, and then they get on, well, then they probably have the camels waiting for them, but instead it was a truck. And then they'd throw candy. So, the candy is the gift. But yeah, I mean, as usual, you have all this history, which is so wonderful to know.
Well, I was also curious why we don't celebrate this in America. Like why it's, even people who aren't necessarily religious at all or don't identify with Christianity, a lot of people celebrate Christmas as a giving time, a time to spend with family. They don't necessarily have the tie-in necessarily with Christianity. And so I was just curious where this 12th night, where the Epiphany went, how it kind of disappeared from our culture. And evidently we have shifted our focus towards New Year's instead. And so there's not really a lot of room for both New Year's and 12th night is what I came across. And so there's just kind of a mind shift change that it's no longer Christmas. It's the New Year celebration.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I would say it's really about commercialism, because there's a big push on Christmas, and it would just be one more push that maybe people couldn't handle. I don't know. But
I know.
So long ago.
Yeah. I mean, you've already overspent everything right at Christmas time, so one more push for buying. Although the gifts from La Befana and the Three Wise Men are really little. They're not like big gifts. They're just little treats and trinkets. And there's a cute little candy that most kids get with La Befana, evidently, that represents coal. It's like a rock candy that's supposed to be black, and evidently all children are supposed to get this because everyone's a
They're
little
not
bad.
perfect. They're not
Everyone's
perfect.
everyone's a little naughty.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I like that. Yeah, I would say also, it's all about Americans being so independent also. And it's one less time that we can all get together on the street and learn about each other. So it would probably be very beneficial to us to have this holiday here. But I think
Mhm.
Halloween is the closest we get to people visiting neighbors in what's supposed to be really kind and generous exchange. And that's not even, I think people are nervous about that now at this point, aren't they?
There is some, I mean, I think at one point people started feeling nervous about it, and that's why trunk or treats became really popular. Uh, I take my kids to trunk or treats because they happen prior to Halloween, and then we still do Halloween. And you see I mean, I don't see a lot of controversy, at least in my specific community. Most people I know do trick or treating, and they're not actually that anxious about it. A lot of one of my very first guests, uh, Christina Downs, talked a little bit about the urban legends surrounding Halloween candy, and how at one point there was all these urban legends that talked about children being poisoned or razor blades being put in their candies. And there was like one or two incidences that actually occurred, but they were by family members. They were not. They were not by neighbors giving out
My
candy. It was
goodness. Oh,
specifically family members who poisoned children, their own child or
okay.
their nephew
Yeah,
or something.
we have to leave this behind. We are not going to end on this note.
Okay, well, I have a few other things. I wanted to look at the parade of the wise men, because biblically this does not happen. I was really confused by this, because in the story there's a whole procession of these that accompany the three wise men that visit La Bafana. And anytime I'd read the story of the three wise men, there's only the three people, not a procession of people. And so I wasn't clear on where this came from. So I did a little research on that. And what I found was the Magi are interpreted as astrologers, scholars, or kings. So, from the idea of the three kings, they would have traveled with an entourage to signify wealth and importance, and probably for safety, because it wasn't really that safe to travel alone. And so they would have been traveling in some sort of caravan with servants and guards and animals, and it would have looked like a formal procession. And so if you see in a lot of these countries that have celebrate the Epiphany in medieval and Renaissance art, it's almost always depicted with large processions or parades. And so you'll see, and so there are these parades. That's why there's parades on the Epiphany or 12th night, or whatever day that they're celebrating in that specific country, to signify their symbolic importance. I also did a little bit of research in the gifts, because, like I said, when I was thinking about what La Bafana brings to Mary, she's bringing housekeeping and treats, which sound like a perfect gift for a new mother. And the three wise men, they bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And I was like, great. Those sound like, I mean, gold, great, cool. I can use gold, anytime, but I can't use it specifically at this moment. But frankincense, there's symbology behind these. So gold is because Jesus is king, it's his royal authority, so associated with divine or gods. Frankincense is divinity, his role as God to be worshipped, because frankincense is a resin from the boswellia tree, traditionally burned in an incense in religious rituals, and it would have symbolized him as a priest acting as a mediator between God and humanity. And then myrrh, because it represents Jesus as the Savior, as sacrificing and suffering for his humanity, which I don't really know if it was already implanted in their heads that Jesus was intended to sacrifice himself. I don't know if there was that cultural understanding. I don't know why this would already be part of the symbology if he hadn't already sacrificed himself, if that was foreshadowed that he was supposed to be a sacrifice. I'm not sure. I don't it says it foreshadowed his suffering and death. And so those were the symbologies behind the three gifts. And evidently those would have actually been extraordinary gifts to have been given. So in modern times, if someone handed me those things, I'd be like, okay, thanks. You know, but during that time, they were quite important to trade and commerce, and they were very widely seen on the Incense Road and the Silk Road, which were common during those time periods.
Okay. Well, that's really important. It really fills in a lot of holes there, Vanessa, as usual. I guess I would just like to finish with, this is just for me, you finish how, whatever it sort of sparks your interest, but I would just like to finish with our considering how women are portrayed in fairy tales. And I think Befana is just this lovable character that I didn't really, I wasn't attracted to at first, and now I am more so. And yet she doesn't need to be portrayed the way she is. I think she could be a beautiful old lady. There are beautiful older ladies who are very fit and generous. And so we could think of her in that way as well. But
rebrand her.
Sorry?
Rebrand her.
Rebrand her. Let's rebrand her. Yes. But I do like that she finally got that she had more opportunities in life and took it.
Yeah.
And she really went for the positive opportunities. So that's my takeaway from this.
Okay, so my last thought was I was curious because she seems so similar to Santa Claus to me, because she brings gifts and she usually comes down a chimney. She's riding a broom rather than a sleigh, but she's still very similar to Santa. So I did a little bit of research into gift bringers, specifically Epiphany gift bringers. There are tons of different gift bringers all over the world that are associated with Christmas. But the three wise men, like I was saying before, are the most popular Epiphany gift givers. They usually give gifts to children in shoes. Then there's La Befana in Italy. And then there's Perchta. Did you come across her? She's from Austria and High Germany, in the areas with the Alpine range.
Interesting.
She is interesting because she is very similar in that she is witch-like. She's similar to La Befana in that she's witch-like. She rewards good children and hardworking servants with silver coin during the Epiphany season, but she's also known for her harsh punishments, including slitting open the bellies of misbehaving children or lazy workers. She has a dual nature, sometimes depicted as beautiful, and other times she's beautiful and kind, and other times she's fearsome and violent. And so she has this like stark dichotomy. So she, La Befana, she's not mean, she's grumpy, and she will thwack you with her broom if you insult her. But she does not go around slitting children's throats or bellies. And then the last thing I found was the symbology of the chimney, because she uses the chimney, and so that's why she's often covered in soot. She does it because she doesn't want to disturb sleeping families, and it connects her to the ancient hearth gods and domestic traditions, because the hearth, I'm saying hearth, but it's hearth. The hearth is the center of family life, because that's where all the food is made throughout the day. And I'm not very familiar with hearths and their symbology. Maybe you have some more familiarity with them.
No, I didn't look into it, but I will look into it for the next time.
And so, but all of these gift givers do encourage children to behave and emphasize morality. And so, anyways, those are my last my last thoughts on La Bafana. But in general, I like her. I do like the idea of rebranding her to maybe being a beautiful old woman. I can see her being this like kind of ugly, misshapen woman prior to her redemption. But maybe as she flies through the air, maybe the weight of her past misdeeds or her past grievances as they fly off, maybe she also transforms into an older beauty. What do you think about that?
Beautiful. Gorgeous. Love it.
All right. Any lasting thoughts?
Nope. Nope. I think we did it.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone who's been listening to Fairytale Flip. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions. And if you have a story that you want us to do a deep dive into, we would love to hear what your thoughts are about what our future fairy tale endeavors should be. And as always, make sure you're subscribing. My channel is called Fabric of Folklore. And Donna has Scaffolding Magic, where you can find her YouTube channel, which is Donna Lee Fields, I believe. But also she has a website where she offers educational resources for educators from all grades, right? What grade levels do you have education?
All ages. All ages. Yeah. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can always find great resources on Donna's Scaffolding Magic. And so make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, hit that notification button so that you get notifications when these podcast episodes drop. And until February, keep the fairy tales alive.